Sarah Chen stared through her kitchen window at the falling autumn leaves, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The morning news played quietly on her tablet, showing the same headlines that had dominated for months. Day 147 of Zexian Integration Program, and mandatory servant assignment reaches Phase 3. She hadn't wanted one. Nobody had. But refusing wasn't an option anymore. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:00 a.m., making her jump despite expecting it. Sarah took a deep breath, smoothed down her simple blue dress, and walked to the door. Her hand shook slightly as she pressed her palm against the scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a tall, slender figure. The Zexian stood at least 7 feet tall, with silvery blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the morning sunlight. Its large, almond-shaped eyes were a deep purple, and they fixed on Sarah with an unsettling intensity. "We are your government-assigned slave. Treat us as you want," the Zexian said in perfect English, its voice melodious yet emotionless. "This unit's designation is Kit 789. Sarah felt her stomach turn. Even after 3 months of watching her neighbors receive their servants, hearing those words made her skin crawl. She was a history professor, for heaven's sake. Her entire career had been devoted to studying civil rights movements and human dignity. "Please, come in," she managed to say, stepping aside. "And please don't call yourself that. I'm Sarah." Kit 789 tilted its head slightly, the first hint of any reaction. "The proper protocol." "I know the protocol," Sarah interrupted gently. "But in this house, we'll do things differently. Would you like some tea?" The Zexian's purple eyes blinked rapidly, processing this departure from expected behavior. "This uni. I am programmed to serve, not to be served." Sarah walked to her kitchen, gesturing for Kit 789 to follow. "Well, I'm a terrible cook anyway. Maybe we can learn from each other." She pulled out a chair at her small dining table. "Please, sit." Kit 789 remained standing, its tall frame making Sarah's cozy apartment feel suddenly cramped. "The Zexian Empire has designated me as your servant to assist in your daily tasks and ensure proper integration into the new order. Resistance or deviation from assigned roles will be reported." Sarah started preparing 2 cups of tea anyway. "It's not resistance to treat someone with basic dignity. Tell me, Kit 789, do you enjoy learning?" Another rapid blink. "Enjoyment is irrelevant to my function. I teach history at the university," Sarah continued, setting a steaming cup of green tea in front of the empty chair. "Or at least I did, before the integration. Did you know that humans have faced similar situations throughout our history, times when one group tried to dominate another?" Kit 789's head tilted again, this time at a different angle. After a long moment, it slowly sat down. "The Zexian Empire's guidance is beneficial to lesser species. This is different from historical oppression." Sarah smiled slightly, noting how Kit 789's speech pattern had already shifted from the opening script. "Maybe we could discuss those differences. I'd be very interested in learning about your perspective on historical integration programs." Through her kitchen window, Sarah could see her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, watching disapprovingly from across the street. Most humans had quickly adapted to treating their Zexian servants as property, either out of fear or a darker embrace of power. But Sarah wouldn't do that. Kit 789 picked up the teacup with surprisingly delicate movements. "This behavior is unusual. You are not following the expected patterns." "No," Sarah agreed, sipping her own tea. "I'm not, and I don't intend to start." She met those purple eyes steadily. "Now shall we discuss how you'd prefer to be addressed?" The morning sun caught the Zexian's silvery skin, and for just a moment, Sarah thought she saw something flicker in those alien eyes, something that looked remarkably like curiosity. 3 weeks had passed since Kit 789's arrival, and Sarah's neighbors were starting to talk. She could feel their stares every morning when she and Kit 789 would sit together on her small balcony, sharing breakfast and discussing history. "Did you see that?" Mrs. Thompson whispered loudly to another neighbor. "She lets it use the good china." Sarah pretended not to hear as she watered her plants, but Kit 789's sensitive ears missed nothing. The Zexian's silvery blue skin rippled slightly, a reaction Sarah had learned meant discomfort. "Your social standing is dropping because of my presence," Kit 789 said, holding a plate of toast. "Perhaps it would be better to follow standard protocols." Sarah turned around and smiled. "Do you enjoy our breakfast conversations?" Kit 789 paused, those purple eyes blinking rapidly. "I'd find them educational." "Then that's all that matters," Sarah said firmly. She sat down and took a bite of toast. "Now tell me more about Zexian architecture. You mentioned crystal spires yesterday." But their peaceful morning was interrupted by loud shouting from next door. Through the thin walls, they could hear Mr. Roberts yelling at his assigned section. Sarah winced at the harsh words. "That is the proper way," Kit 789 said quietly. "He maintains order and authority." Sarah put down her cup. "Is it? What does cruelty achieve except more pain?" She looked directly at Kit 789. "In all our talks about human history, what lasting empires were built on fear alone?" Kit 789's head tilted, processing. "The database indicates that cooperative societies showed 47% more longevity than purely authoritarian ones." "Exactly," Sarah nodded. "Besides, I've noticed something interesting about you, Kit 789. The Zexian straightened, suddenly alert. "What have you noticed?" "Your speech patterns have changed. You use I now instead of this unit. You ask questions. You share opinions." Sarah leaned forward, "Almost like you're learning to be yourself." Kit 789 stood abruptly, nearly knocking over the teacup. "I must report for daily maintenance." Sarah watched as the tall figure hurried inside. She had struck a nerve, or whatever the Zexian equivalent was. Later that evening, while Sarah was grading papers from her now small group of private students, someone knocked on her door. It was Mrs. Thompson, her face pinched with worry. "Sarah, dear, we're concerned about you," she said, inviting herself in. Her own Zexian servant stood silently behind her, head bowed. "This friendly behavior with your servant, it's not natural. The Zexians have a proper order for things." Sarah noticed how Mrs. Thompson's Zexian flinched slightly at her harsh tone. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm quite happy with my approach." "They conquered us, Sarah. They're our masters, but at least they gave us someone to control in return. Don't you want to feel powerful again?" "Power isn't everything," Sarah said quietly. She saw Kit 789 watching from the kitchen, those purple eyes unblinking. "Sometimes kindness is stronger than force." After Mrs. Thompson left in a huff, Kit 789 approached Sarah. "Your response was unexpected. Mrs. Thompson offered you a chance to gain status in the new hierarchy." Sarah turned to the dishes in her sink. "Would you like to help me wash these? You can try." Kit 789 stared at the offered dishcloth for a long moment. Then, slowly, those long fingers reached out to take it. "I would like that." They worked in comfortable silence until Kit 789 spoke again. "Sarah, what is this feeling when one's expected responses conflict with observed better alternatives?" Sarah smiled, handing over a wet plate. "That, my friend, is called independent thinking. And it's the most powerful force in any universe." Outside, the sun was setting on another day in occupied Earth. But in Sarah's kitchen, something new was rising. A quiet rebellion of kindness that would prove stronger than any weapon. Sarah couldn't sleep. Something about Kit 789's behavior today had been odd. She sat up in bed, replaying the events in her mind. It had started during their morning history discussion. Sarah had been talking about the civil rights movement when she noticed Kit 789 making quick notes on a small device. "What are you writing?" she had asked. Kit 789 had hidden the device so fast it seemed to vanish. Standard reports. All servants must document their humans' activities. But Sarah had seen these reports before. They were usually done at night, not during conversations, and Kit 789 had never tried to hide them before. Now, at midnight, Sarah heard soft footsteps in the living room. She crept to her bedroom door and peeked out. Kit 789 stood in the center of the room, surrounded by floating holographic screens. The Zexian's silver-blue skin glowed softly in the blue light as those long fingers moved quickly through the air, organizing data. Sarah caught glimpses of other humans on the screens, her neighbors, each with their Zexian servants. She saw Mrs. Thompson screaming at her servant, Mr. Roberts ordering his to clean the same spot over and over, and herself sharing tea with Kit 789. Subject continues to display anomalous behavior, Kit 789 whispered, speaking in a different language. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but the tone was troubled. Kindness levels exceed expected parameters. Evidence suggests genuine ethical framework rather than calculated resistance. Sarah leaned forward, trying to hear better. The floor creaked. The screens vanished instantly. Kit 789 turned, those purple eyes glowing slightly in the dark. "Sarah, you should be asleep. And you should be honest with me," Sarah said, stepping into the room. Those weren't standard reports, were they? Kit 789's skin rippled with colors. Blue, silver, then a flash of green she'd never seen before. "I cannot discuss this." "You're studying us," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. "All of you are." "But why? You've already conquered Earth. What more do you need to know?" Kit 789 stood very still. "Humans are unpredictable. You do not respond like other species. When given power over others, some of you embrace cruelty, yes. But others," the Zexian looked directly at Sarah, "others show unexpected resistance through kindness." "Is that wrong?" Sarah asked, moving closer. "To be kind. It is inefficient," Kit 789 said. "Kindness serves no purpose in the hierarchy. It does not increase status or power, yet you persist. Why?" Sarah thought about Mrs. Thompson and her angry words, about Mr. Roberts and his cruel commands. Then she thought about the small changes she'd seen in Kit 789, the questions, the independent thoughts, the hidden observations. "Because kindness isn't about power," she said softly. "It's about seeing the person behind the title, even if that person isn't human." Kit 789's skin rippled again, and this time the green color stayed longer. "I must submit my findings. But Sarah, I find myself questioning the parameters of this study." "What do you mean?" "The data suggests that human unpredictability, especially regarding ethical choices, may be valuable, different, worth more than just study." Kit 789 hesitated. "I should not be telling you this." Sarah reached out and gently touched Kit 789's arm, the first time she had initiated physical contact. The skin felt warm, alive. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. Kit 789 looked at her hand, then at the spot where the screens had been. Perhaps that is what makes humans so dangerous and so fascinating. In the quiet of the night, two beings from different worlds stood together, both realizing that they were part of something much bigger than a simple servant program, something that could change both their species forever. If only they could survive what was coming next. The coffee shop was busy enough that no one noticed Sarah sitting alone in the corner, pretending to grade papers. She kept glancing at her watch. 2:29 p.m. Almost time. Kit 789 was at their mandatory weekly maintenance check, which gave Sarah exactly 1 hour to meet with others who had noticed strange things about their Zexian servants. At exactly 2:30, a young man with glasses sat down across from her. "I hear you like history," he said, using the code phrase they had agreed on. "Especially recent developments," Sarah replied, completing the exchange. "I'm Sarah." "David," he said quietly. "My Zexian, Tick 456, has been acting different, like yours." Before Sarah could respond, a woman in a business suit joined them. "Emily," she introduced herself, "and I think we're all here for the same reason." Sarah looked around carefully before speaking. "Our Zexians are collecting data, but not just about our obedience. They're studying how we handle power." David nodded. "Last week, I saw Tick 456 reviewing footage of me, but the files were marked Ethical Response Study, not Servant Compliance Report. They're watching us more closely when we're kind to them," Emily added. "My Zexian has 3 times more monitoring equipment than my neighbor's, and my neighbor is not nice to hers." Sarah shared what she had seen in Kit 789's late-night reports. As she spoke, she noticed a Zexian walking past the coffee shop window. Its purple eyes swept the room in what seemed like a casual glance. "We need to be careful," Sarah whispered. "But I think this is bigger than just data collection." Kit 789 said something about human unpredictability being valuable. "Valuable for what?" David asked. Emily leaned forward. "My brother works in the new government building. He says the Zexians argue among themselves about humans. Some think we're dangerous, others think we're promising." Sarah thought about Kit 789's green skin ripple, a color she had never seen before that night. "I think they're testing us, all of us, but not to see if we'll obey. To see if we'll resist," David suggested. "No," Sarah said slowly. "To see how we'll resist. Violence, power, or kindness," Emily finished. "They want to see if we'll become like them when we have the chance." The same Zexian passed by the window again. This time, Sarah was sure it wasn't a coincidence. "We need to spread the word," she said quickly, quietly, "not to resist or fight, but to be kind, to show them a different way." "Some people won't listen," David warned. "They enjoy having someone to control." "Then we start with those who will listen," Sarah said firmly. "Every person who chooses kindness over power proves something important." Emily checked her phone. "We have to go. Our servants will be back soon." As they stood to leave, Sarah noticed something strange. The Zexian outside wasn't watching them anymore. It was talking into a communication device, and its skin had that same flash of green she had seen on Kit 789. That evening, when Kit 789 returned from maintenance, Sarah noticed something different. The Zexian's movements were less rigid, more natural. And there was something new in those purple eyes, something that looked almost like hope. "Was your maintenance check okay?" Sarah asked casually. Kit 789 looked at her for a long moment. The results were unexpected. Like many things about humans. The Zexian paused. "Sarah, what do you know about Galactic Federation membership requirements?" Before Sarah could answer, all the lights in the city went out at once. The city had been dark for 3 days. The Zexian authorities called it a temporary system adjustment. But Sarah knew better. Something was changing. In the darkness, people had to help each other. And in helping each other, they started treating their Zexian servants differently too. Sarah watched from her window as Mr. Roberts, who had always been cruel to his servant, shared his flashlight with the Zexian, so they could both see while fixing a broken door. Next door, Mrs. Thompson had stopped yelling and started asking her servant questions about their homeworld. "They're learning," Kit 789 said softly, standing beside Sarah. "Like I did." Sarah smiled. Sometimes people just need a reason to be better. The sound of marching came from the street. A group of Zexian officials, their skin glowing faintly in the dark, moved from house to house. They carried strange devices that blinked with red lights. "They're checking for something," Sarah whispered. "What are those devices?" Kit 789's skin rippled with worry. "Emotional resonance scanners. They detect bonds between humans and sections." The tall figure hesitated. "They're not supposed to exist." "What do you mean?" "Sections aren't supposed to form emotional connections. We're supposed to be logical, hierarchical." But here, Kit 789's voice trailed off. Sarah understood. Here on Earth, something unexpected was happening. The servants were changing. The humans were changing. And the Zexian authorities were scared. A knock at the door made them both jump. Sarah opened it to find Emily, David, and their Zexian servants standing there. "They're taking them away," Emily said quickly. "Any Zexian who shows signs of emotional contamination. We need help." Sarah looked at Kit 789, who nodded. "Come in, quickly." As they huddled in Sarah's dark living room, they could hear the officials moving closer. David's servant, Tick 456, spoke up. "The authorities fear what is happening here," it said. "Humans were supposed to embrace power over us. Instead, many of you chose kindness. And that kindness, it changes us. Is that bad?" Sarah asked. Kit 789's skin suddenly glowed with that strange green color. "It is revolutionary. Our society has been based on strict hierarchy for 10,000 years. But in just months, humans have shown us a different way." More people arrived at Sarah's door, neighbors she had never spoken to, each with their Zexian servant. They had all seen the changes, felt the difference that kindness made. Mrs. Thompson was the last to arrive, her Zexian close behind her. Her face was wet with tears. "I was wrong," she said simply. "So wrong." They could hear the officials just 2 houses away now. The scanning devices beeped loudly in the quiet street. "What do we do?" someone whispered. Sarah stood up. "We show them what we've learned. All of us. Not just humans, but Zexians too. We show them that real strength isn't about power over others." Kit 789 moved to stand beside her. "It's about power with others." The officials were at the house next door. Their scanners were beeping faster. Sarah looked around the room at humans and Zexians standing together, no longer masters and servants, but something new, something better. "Whatever happens," she said, "we've already won, because we chose to be kind when we could have been cruel. We chose to connect when we could have controlled." The officials reached her door. The scanners were screaming now. Kit 789's hand found Sarah's in the dark. The Zexian's skin glowed bright green, lighting up the room. "They're here," Kit 789 said softly. "And they're about to learn what real power looks like." The Zexian officials didn't break down the door like everyone expected. Instead, they simply turned off their screaming scanners and knocked politely. Sarah and Kit 789 exchanged glances. The room full of humans and Zexians held their breath as Sarah opened the door. 3 tall Zexian officials stood there, their ceremonial robes glowing with soft patterns. But what caught Sarah's attention was their skin. All 3 were glowing with the same green color she had seen on Kit 789. "We've been waiting for this," the tallest official said, speaking perfect English, "for a group to understand the truth without being told." Sarah felt Kit 789's hand squeeze hers gently. "What truth?" The officials stepped inside, looking around at the mixed group of humans and Zexians with what seemed like approval. "We are not conquerors," the second official said. "We are evaluators. Earth is the 107th world we have tested for membership in the Galactic Federation." The room burst into confused whispers. Mrs. Thompson stepped forward. "Tested. This was all a test. The most important test," the third official explained. "Not of technology or military strength, but of moral character, of what a species does with power over those they believe to be their conquerors. Kit 789 spoke up. That's why we were sent as servants, to see if humans would embrace cruelty or choose compassion. Most species fail, the first official said sadly. They take their anger at being conquered out on their assigned servants. They embrace the chance to dominate others. They become what they hate. Sarah thought about how close humanity had come to failing. How many people had initially treated their Zexian servants with cruelty. But then she thought about how that had changed. The blackout, she said suddenly. You did that on purpose, to force people to work together. The officials nodded. Sometimes people need a little darkness to see the light in themselves. The second one said. David raised his hand like he was still in school. But why pretend to be conquered? Why not just ask to join the Federation? Because anyone can be good when they're trying to impress others, Kit 789 answered. True character shows when you think no one is watching. When you believe you've lost everything, what you do then, that's who you really are. The third official stepped forward. Humanity was supposed to take years to reach this point, but you, he looked at Sarah, you showed kindness from the first day. And that kindness spread. Like a rebellion, but one fought with compassion instead of weapons. What happens now? Emily asked, holding onto her Zexian's arm. Now, the first official said, we reveal the truth to everyone. And we offer humanity a choice. What choice? Several voices asked at once. To join the Federation, not as a conquered species, but as equals. And the official looked around the room. To help us reform the testing process itself. Because you've shown us that perhaps we too have something to learn about power and kindness. Sarah felt Kit 789's skin ripple with emotion against her hand. Around the room, other Zexians were glowing green, and their human friends were smiling through tears. There will be those who resist this truth, the second official warned, who prefer the illusion of power over others. Then we'll help them understand, Sarah said firmly, the same way we learned, one act of kindness at a time. Outside, the city lights began to come back on. But inside Sarah's living room, the green glow of changed hearts lit up the darkness just fine on its own. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. Every TV channel, radio station, and phone screen showed the same message from the Zexian High Council. The test is complete. Earth has been evaluated for Galactic Federation membership. Sarah watched the announcement from her living room, surrounded by both human and Zexian friends. Kit 789 sat beside her, their shared months of friendship now feeling even more meaningful. Not everyone is taking it well, David said, pointing to his tablet. Videos showed angry crowds in some cities, people who felt tricked or manipulated. They're afraid, Kit 789 explained. Change is difficult, especially when it challenges what you believe about yourself. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. The Zexian officials wanted her to speak at the United Nations tomorrow, to share her story of choosing kindness from day one. I can't do that, she said, her hands shaking. I'm just a history teacher. Mrs. Thompson, who had become a close friend since the night of the revelation, touched her arm. You're the one who showed us a better way. When the rest of us were angry and cruel, you chose differently. Outside, they could hear a crowd gathering. Sarah went to the window, worried it might be protesters. Instead, she saw hundreds of people and their Zexian friends walking together, carrying lights in the darkness. The crowd moved like a river of stars through the street. They're going to the city hall, Emily said, checking her phone. Every city is doing this. Humans and Zexians walking together to show they choose friendship over power. The Zexian High Council had given Earth's governments 48 hours to make an official decision about Federation membership. But the people weren't waiting for the politicians. We should join them, Sarah said suddenly. Everyone looked at her in surprise. If I'm going to speak at the UN tomorrow, I want to walk with my friends tonight. They joined the crowd outside, which grew larger with every block. Sarah saw Mr. Roberts walking beside his Zexian, both of them laughing at some shared joke. Children sat on Zexian's shoulders, their small hands holding bright lights that matched the green glow of their tall friends. "Look," Kit 789 said softly, pointing ahead. The crowd was approaching City Hall, where another group waited. These were the people who had opposed the friendship between humans and Zexians. They held angry signs and shouted about betrayal. The crowd of friends slowed down, uncertain. Sarah stepped forward, Kit 789 beside her. She walked up to the leader of the protesters, a man whose face was red with anger. "We were supposed to be stronger than them," he said. "That's what conquest means." "But we are stronger," Sarah replied gently. "Strong enough to choose kindness when we could have chosen cruelty. Strong enough to make friends instead of servants." Kit 789 spoke up, voice clear in the quiet street. "Your strength amazed us. Not the strength to fight or dominate, but the strength to grow, to change, to show us a better way." A little girl broke away from the crowd and walked up to one of the protesters. She held out her light, offering to share. After a long moment, the protester knelt down and accepted it. One by one, lights were shared. Angry faces softened. Questions were asked and answered. The two groups slowly became one. Sarah felt Kit 789's hand slip into hers as they watched. "This is why Earth passed the test," the Zexian said quietly. "Not because you were perfect, but because you could learn, because you could change." Sarah looked at her friend and smiled. "We all changed, and we're still changing." Above them, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the whole galaxy was watching Earth choose its path forward, not through force or fear, but through the quiet strength of kindness. 1 year had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Federation. Sarah stood at the window of her new office in the Federation Tower, looking out at the changed city below. Human and Zexian children played together in the parks, their laughter carrying up to the 50th floor. "Ready for the ceremony?" Kit 789 asked, entering the room. The Zexian no longer wore servant's clothes, but the formal robes of a Federation Council member, matching Sarah's own. "Hard to believe we're here," Sarah said, straightening her collar. From history teacher to head of the ethics committee. They walked together to the Great Hall, where representatives from 100 different worlds waited. Earth had surprised everyone in the past year, not just by passing the test, but by changing the Federation itself. "Look who's here," Kit 789 pointed out. Mrs. Thompson waved from her seat. She now ran a program helping other species learn from Earth's experience. Behind her sat Mr. Roberts, who had become one of the strongest voices for peaceful cooperation between worlds. David and Emily were there too, along with their Zexian friends. They had all helped write the new Federation guidelines for testing potential member worlds, guidelines that focused on encouraging cooperation instead of testing through deception. The hall fell quiet as the Federation president, a tall being made of shifting crystal, approached the podium. 1 year ago, the president's voice rang out. "We believed we knew how to test a species' readiness for Federation membership. We thought we had to trick them, to see their worst before we could trust their best." Sarah felt Kit 789's hand slip into hers as the president continued. "But humans taught us something remarkable. They showed us that true character isn't revealed by forcing people to their lowest point. It's revealed by giving them the chance to rise to their highest." On the giant screens around the hall, images played of that remarkable year, the night when humans and Zexians had walked together with lights, the first human-Zexian wedding, schools where children of different species learned together, hospitals where healers from a dozen worlds shared their knowledge. Today, the president announced, "We welcome our first new member world under the Earth Protocol. No conquest, no servants, just open hands and open hearts." A group of beings that looked like living shadows stepped forward, their forms rippling with joy. They were from a planet called Nexus, and they had asked to join the Federation after hearing Earth's story. Sarah stepped up to the podium. A year ago, speaking to crowds had terrified her. Now she smiled at the gathered species, some with tentacles, some made of light, some that looked like living crystals. On my first day with Kit 789, she began, I was given a choice. I could treat someone as a slave or as a friend. It seemed like a small choice then, but small choices can change worlds. She looked at Kit 789, whose skin glowed with that now familiar green of joy and friendship. Today, we make another choice. We choose to believe in the best of each species we meet. We choose to offer friendship first, because that's what humanity learned in our test, that true strength isn't in conquering others, but in lifting them up. The hall erupted in applause, the sound of 100 different species celebrating together. Outside, the sun set on another day in the new earth, where government-assigned slaves had become family, and where the power of kindness had changed not just one world, but an entire galaxy. Sarah and Kit 789 walked back to their office together, already planning their next project. After all, there were many more worlds to meet, and many more chances to choose kindness over power. The stars shone brightly that night, each one perhaps holding another world waiting to learn what Earth had taught the galaxy, that the greatest power of all is the choice to be kind.